Joining me now is Michael Moore, Academy Award-winning filmmaker and host of the Michael Moore podcast. Michael, it's great to have you back on the show. You know, I don't want to go back to 2016, but you obviously predicted at the time that Trump would win. Last month, you wrote Trump is toast. We're almost 48 hours out from perhaps seeing our first results, but do you stand behind that today?
Oh, even more so. I just keep wondering the gift that the Trump campaign keeps giving us. I don't think they realize, I don't think they really are in touch with where the majority of Americans are at. The majority of Americans do not want this divisiveness. They don't want a threat of violence. We are okay to disagree with each other, but that's where it ends. We go to vote. Who wins, wins. Half the time I've been very happy with who's won, and the other half of the time I haven't been. And we move on with our lives. The fact that the way that what you just played here, I hadn't heard Trump utter those words. I'd heard somebody say that he said them, but to hear him say that about they can shoot through the media, the assassins, go ahead and fire, and all those other things you just played, it's like they really believe that the average normal American wants to hear that. They actually believe that we don't like immigrants. We are immigrants. We are all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of immigrants, unless you are African American or unless you're amongst the first peoples that were here. We are all the product of immigrants, and we love our grandparents and our great-grandparents and the people that got us here to this great country. And to talk about immigrants in this vicious, vile way, and you think of all the things that we have and we've given the world, and the anger and hatred toward Muslims and Arabs. Steve Jobs. I mean, this never gets discussed. Maybe I'm just a trivia nerd, but he's born of Muslim parents. His parents were Arab, and they put him up for adoption. They had to put him up for adoption, and was adopted by the Jobs family. Yeah. But I wouldn't be talking to you maybe on this device right now in this way without this offspring of a Muslim or an Arab. And I think most Americans, we get down on our knees and thank God that we are the children of immigrants, that we are built this country with immigrants. And the fact that we have somewhere, depending on what numbers you want to believe in, somewhere between 9 million and 11 million jobs right now that we do not have enough people to fill. We have upwards to 11 million unfilled jobs. And as we are told, we have maybe 11 million immigrants who aren't here legally. Geez, doesn't that if you have a heart, if you have love in you, if you're proud of this country that was built by immigrants, doesn't somewhere in your head go, geez, we need 11 million jobs filled. We have 11 million people that need citizenship. Why don't we go there? Well, I do. And I think a lot of people are like me. And I think that they are going to be very surprised. I'm talking about the Trump people and the MAGA nation by what's going to happen on Tuesday. Not only do I feel, to answer your question 10 minutes later, that I feel the same way that I felt a few weeks ago that Trump is toast. Absolutely. I feel it more. Now, I know I don't want to say it too loudly because our work isn't done. Right. We all have doors to knock on tomorrow. We all have to make sure we get people to vote. I've asked everybody to think of 3 people that maybe they know at work or school or whatever that aren't going to vote. To get them to the polls, drive them to the polls, take them to lunch afterwards, have a party after work, after you've taken the office to go vote. We have work to do in these 48 hours. But having said that, I'm very optimistic and hopeful. And frankly, and I know people watching this, Mike, how can you say that? Yeah. We have all these crazy people and all the Trumpsters and MAGA Nation. And what I say to them is, honestly, I have a lot of personal, deep faith in my fellow Americans.
Yeah, and it's definitely
they're going to do the right thing.
It's a very important sentiment. I think a lot of people are definitely counting on the goodness of Americans to see this through. Let me just talk about your state, Michigan, for a moment. And I want to talk about the last time you joined us back in July when Biden was still running. You had this to say about his support for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Take a listen.
The fact that he would decide to hug Netanyahu, to go there and tell him, as the tape you just showed in November, just people wanting a ceasefire, that's it. No, he goes, no. This has, I think, really rattled people in my state.
All right, so that was back in July. Give me a sense of what you anticipate happening in Michigan on Tuesday.
Well, when Biden was running there in the early summer, support for Biden-Harris, which was at 70% 4 years ago, they got 70% of the Michigan Arab Muslim vote, was down to 12% because of Biden endorsing, embracing, and enabling the slaughter of tens of thousands of civilians. I don't know anybody watching this, whether you're Irish, with whatever group you're part of, if you were Jewish, if you were, I mean, just pick the group, and your tax dollars were going to kill the cousins, the relatives, the friends, the neighbors of where you came from. What do you think the people of Detroit and Dearborn are going to do with that? Well, the good news is Biden stepped aside, Kamala Harris came in, and that 12% support of Biden-Harris jumped to over 43%. That's good news, but it's still quite a bit behind the 70% they had 4 years ago. So we're estimating in Michigan, possibly we need 40,000 votes of the 40,000 Arab and Muslim Americans they're not going to vote for Trump. I mean, he already had 1/3 of the vote. He'll get 1/3 of it this time, not anymore. They haven't moved to Trump. They're either, because of their grief, not going to vote, or they're going to vote, which is what 75,000 Michiganders did for 2016. 75,000 Michiganders in Democratic-leaning districts decided to go to the polls, and I think a lot of Muslims and Arabs are going to do that on Tuesday, and vote for every candidate down ballot. And they left the top line, the president line, blank. Not Hillary, not Trump. 75,000 did that. We just need a few thousand of them
to carry the state.
To this time say, and don't expect Muslim and Arabs to come forward and do that. As I've told you and others, I don't feel it's right for me to say to you that you've got to do this. I'm a white guy. It'd be like a white guy going to Alabama in the 1960s and telling black people, you've got to vote for George Wallace because he's the Democrat, and we got to get Lyndon Johnson elected here in '64. So you got to vote for. You'd be like, you wouldn't do it. First of all, white person would go down there to Alabama to tell them you got to vote for the people supporting the lynching of your relatives, of your people. So let's stop that. We're gonna win Michigan. I believe we're gonna maybe eke it out, but that's because there's 2 million non-voters there. And for the last 2 months, my friends and I, and a group I put together, we have been getting out the non-voter, what I call the non-voter party, which is our second largest party in the country. Get them to get enough thousands of them to vote. Get enough thousands of the people who left the top line blank in 2016, and maybe we can make up for the votes of the people that cannot, in good conscience, bring themselves to do this. But there's enough of us left to make up for that and to help Kamala Harris over the finish line.
Let me ask you, Michael, I'm sorry we're almost out of time, about 30 seconds left, but do you think if Donald Trump were to lose on Tuesday, it is going to be the end of Trumpism, or is this going to be the new hallmark of the Republican Party going forward?
Great question. It'll be the end of Trumpism if we have a huge vote. This is why I'm begging people in California, New York, places where you already know the vote, Idaho, don't think that your vote doesn't count. It really counts. We need to run up that popular vote as high as possible. One thing Trump understands is crowd size. And we need to, so Biden beat Trump by 7 million last time. We got to beat Trump by 10 million, 17 million, 20 million this time. A huge turnout. And people voting for Harris to send the message to him and to the other people in MAGA Nation. We don't want fascism. We want democracy. Don't think of running again. Grow up, be an American, and do the right thing. You can disagree with us, but no more of this. Right. So I'm hopeful if we have that large turnout for Harris, that is exactly what will happen. And I'll just end by saying this, that I think there's a political scientist. I think I've seen her on MSNBC before, Rachel Bitecofer, Dr. Bitecofer, who is a wonderful political scientist. And she just put out her analysis of the election today for Tuesday. And she said that the Trump campaign has made a horrible mistake in thinking that after Dobbs, you just get the male vote. We got to go get the male vote. Well, that's not going to make up for the tsunami of women who have been out at early voting and who are going to be there on Tuesday. And, Trump says we control the weather. I want him to keep thinking that, because I think what we have created is a large, huge turnout of female voters. They are going to save this country. Thank God for the women of this country, and they need to be. We need to listen. We've had 250 years of nobody in the White House who's a woman. That's 250 years of gender apartheid. It ends this week. What a great week to be alive. That's what I wanted to say. And thank you, Ayman, for who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Michael Moore. Always appreciate it. Great to have you on the show. We'll definitely check back with you once the election is over. Thank you, my friend.